They don't even wait for us to cast the Primeval Titan, as they already know that it's coming, and they just go ahead and scoop it up there. So, hello and welcome everybody. We are back here for the 5th and final match here with our amulet list that you see on screen. Don't mind the missing Grafdigger's cage. That is only there because this is after the recording of the match. Sadly, like the previous couple matches, the sound had to be redacted. And by had to be, I mean, I didn't choose for that to happen, but for some reason my recording software did. So, anyways, don't worry about this one. It's in the list. I'll talk a little bit about changes to the list after I go through this match. But for now, let's just go ahead and jump straight into it. I will see you guys for game 1. So we're finally on the play, which is a great thing here. And we are greeted with the following hand. Garenbrig, a couple forests, a Gruul Turf as a bounce land, Explorer to get things going on turn 2, and a Dryad to round things out. We just need to find a Titan, and this hand is looking pretty good. Stirrings to potentially find an Amulet would be nice. So obviously we're going to keep this. Our opponent mulligans to 6, then to 5, then to 4 cards, which is very unfortunate. There are a few things to be gleaned from this information, though, and that is there are a couple of decks that are more likely to mulligan than others, and those decks include Mono Green Tron, where they're trying to assemble turn 3 Tron as consistently as possible, and that includes mulliganing into the proper cards. Dredge, which needs a very specific type of hand to work, including a way to discard some cards into their graveyard to dredge up, and a couple of enablers. And, of course, the opponent that we're facing is playing Bogles, as you already know by the title of this video. And Bogles is the kind of deck that needs to mulligan until it finds a 1 or 2 drop threat, including either a Hexproof creature for 1 mana, or a Core Spirit Dancer on 2 mana. Those are the cards that our opponent would be looking for here, and that's why they're mulliganing so far as down to even 4 cards. They just have to have a threat, or there's nothing they can do. So, of course, our opponent is giving us that information by mulliganing so heavily here. And we're going to go ahead and lead off on Ancient Stirrings, of course, finding Karn the Great Creator. We choose not to pick up one of the amulets here, as we already have our access to Titan mana, and we are just lacking a threat at this point. And there's a strong possibility that Karn will be great here, as we can explore on turn 2 to set up a turn 3 Karn, if we so desire that. And we do choose to take the Karn over the amulets here, because it gives us something to do, and we just need to top deck a Titan. Amulet isn't really helping us ramp here, so that is the choice. And we pass it back to our opponent. Our opponent is going to play turn 1 Boggle, of course, the card that they were mulliganing to have in their opening hand. The other one being Gladecover Scout. And, yeah, they're passing the turn back, of course. And here we top deck a Grazer, which is interesting. Probably best to just go ahead and play the land and explore here. Shock into Breeding Pool because we can, and we happen to have found Amulet, which is fantastic. Here, we're going to play that Amulet so that if we top deck a Titan, we can just play it this upcoming turn. And we'll pass it back to our opponent as they shock in a Temple Garden. Put a Core Spirit Dancer into play, attack for 1 and pass. Not the most impressive, of course, but the Spirit Dancer is going to help them refill their hand every time they cast an aura. This will help them get out of their mulligan, of course, so that's pretty good for them. We untap and top deck the Titan. Fantastic. So, with the following cards, we can actually play a Dryad and Titan this turn. If we were to play Gruul Turf, float 4 mana, leaving the Garenbrig untapped, pick up the Gruul Turf, play Grazer, going down to 3 mana, but then in turn up to 5 mana here with the Gruul Turf and picking it back up, using 3 of that 5 mana down to 2 mana to play the Dryad, and then playing Gruul Turf off of the extra land from the Dryad to make 4 mana, and then activate the Garenbrig that we left untapped to cast Titan here. So things are pretty much over at this point. We're going to go ahead and throw our Gruul Turf into play, pick it back up, play our Grazer here, put our Gruul Turf into play, pick it back up, play our Dryad here, throw the Gruul Turf into play, float the mana, and pick it back up. Actually, we're picking up a non-Gruul Turf land, as we can probably get a bounce land into play off of our Titan here, so might as well have the additional mana source in play. Not like it really makes a huge difference. This game is pretty much already over, so of course we're going to go ahead and play our Titan here. That is assuming that the client stops spazzing out. Ah, okay. I was confused here. It's because as soon as we float the 6 mana, our opponent already knows what's up. They are expecting Primeval Titan to come into play. They don't even wait for us to cast the Primeval Titan, as they already know that it's coming, and they just go ahead and scoop it up there. So, onto sideboarding. Alright guys, so we are here for the sideboarding before we head into game 2 here, and we have brought in these 7 cards right here and taken out these 7 cards right here. We're removing the Bog and the Cavernous Holes because they do nothing relevant at all. We've removed the 4 Explorers as in this matchup we just want to get a Titan into play as fast as possible, and Explorer's a little bit slow for that, so we can afford to trim on Explorers here. And we also cut 1 Summoner's Pact in the case that our opponent is playing something like Aven Mind Sensor in the sideboard. Also, the fact that a single Titan coming into play will probably just end the game anyways, as it'll let us get a Talari West into play, transmute for Engineered Explosives, and go ham on our opponent that way. So we don't really need more than 1 Summoner's Pact here, even if it involves trying to set up a Dryad. We don't actually need to set all of that up, so we do trim on 1 Summoner's Pact here. And we bring in, of course, the Engineered Explosives, the end-all, be-all against Bogles here, as it'll help us deal with their hexproof threats, and also, at the very least, be taking a bunch of enchantments off the battlefield, which is very devastating for them. Explosives on 1 is insane, and Explosives on 2 to deal with a Core Spirit Dancer and like Daybreak Cornets and stuff is also reasonable, so obviously we want this, although we do leave 1 in the sideboard here to go along with our Karn the Great Creator so that we can minus Karn for Explosives, which I think is very important. We also bring in 2 copies of Dismember here, which might seem unusual against the Hexproof deck, but of course, the card that I'm thinking about bringing these Dismembers in for, other than a potential Aven Mind Sensor, which I think is just something that you play around, but not something that you really expect. Dismember here is going to come into play to deal with these Core Spirit Dancers, as them drawing a bunch of cards off of their auras is very problematic, and oftentimes a Bogles opponent will go all in on a Core Spirit Dancer, expecting your opponent to have no removal for it, and having some Dismembers to be able to blow that out can be quite powerful here. And of course, we're bringing in the enchantment interaction, such as Force of Vigor, Reclamation Sage, and Wilt. Those are a no-brainer. And yeah, let's jump straight into game 2. Alright guys, we are here for game 2, on the draw of course, and we are greeted with the following opening hand. We've got a couple bounce lands, we've got an untapped source for Stirrings on 1, we've got some other lands to go along here, but we don't really have any ramp. It's possible that this hand could be a keep, since we could draw into the ramp that we need, like Grazers or Dryads or whatever, but seeing as we have to pack for our Titan as well, and there's no obvious path to get to Engineered Explosives, which is going to be pretty pivotal in a matchup like this, I think it's fair to go ahead and mulligan this one, and so that's what we choose to do. Instead, we now have a hand that contains a bounce land and the Sunhome, again, unfortunately, and an Amulet to go along, which actually is a little better for us, a Force of Vigor to interact with our opponent's potential enchantments, and a couple Titans. We'll probably end up putting one of these Titans on the bottom, as our Karn is a little more feasible to cast and will get us Engineered Explosives. So of course we are going to go ahead and keep this hand, putting, again, one of those Titans on the bottom. Don't need 2 of those. And if we have to, we can pitch our Titan to the Force to maintain a little bit of stability here, but our opponent manages to find a Boggle, and we're going to go ahead and play turn 1 Amulet, of course. We have a green card to go along with our Force of Vigor, something to pitch if we want to. We might just use it if we find a green source, but our opponent's going to play a land and a Damping Sphere, which is, that's an interesting one. This Damping Sphere could be problematic, considering our Boros Garrison is our only colored source, so thankfully we can hit that one with Force, so that's something that's easy to play around with a hand like this, but definitely you got to be careful how we sequence things here. Opponent attacks with Boggle and land. Don't find it. So here we're going to go ahead and put our Boros Garrison into play. Picking up the Sunhome, trying to keep up our land drop progress, as when we do eventually Force, we'll be able to tap this Boros Garrison for 2 mana, so our opponent plays a Grist Boon on their Slippery Boggle to give it +1/+1, and +1/+0, my bad, and flying, and they can get this one back from the graveyard for 4 mana. We don't really care about this, so that's fine. Another Grist Boon, we still don't care about. Paying 1 extra to their own Damping Sphere. In fact, there is a slight upside to our opponent having Damping Sphere, and that is things like this, where our opponent couldn't play a 2-drop enchantment this turn thanks to their own Damping Sphere, so it's actually in some ways helping us. We take the 3 damages, of course we don't care about this, and we don't feel like we're going to get lucky and spike the bounce land off the top, so we're not going to go ahead and force to hit a Grist Boon and Damping Sphere, because we have much better targets for this force, like a Daybreak Coronet, so no reason to try to play around that one in particular. Here we're just going to untap. We draw Engineered Explosives, which is a fantastic one. And Obviously, there's nothing we can do to cast Engineered Explosives here, considering we don't have colored mana, so just making a little bit of a testing move there. So yeah, we just go ahead and pass it back to our opponent, and we'll see what they can make out of this turn here. They immediately go to attack for 3, which is fine with us. They play a land, tapped, and pass the turn. And now is the time, as if we draw any land, we'll be able to put this Karn into play, and that should be pretty good. We can also go ahead and play explosives on 1 and blow it up, which could be quite useful here to get rid of their Boggle, make sure they have no threat, as they haven't played anything else from their 2-card hand, so there's a strong possibility they're holding lands or something like that, and we just want to go ahead and get this Boggle out of play. We have Karn to line up a second explosive, so we're going to go ahead and force pitching one of these dead Ancient Stirrings, get rid of one of the boons and the Stamping Sphere, of course. And we do, in fact, top deck the green bounce land that we were hoping for. This lets us cast Karn and Stirrings, thanks to the fact that Damping Sphere is no longer in play to tax one of these spells. So we're going to throw that Sanctuary into play, float the mana, all of the mana, pick up the Sun Home because we might as well make a land drop progress here. Cast the Ancient Stirrings, finding a basic forest over any of these other cards because we just want to make our way towards Titan mana here. Having these 2 lands in hand means that in 2 turns we'll be able to play Titan guaranteedly, assuming our opponent doesn't have another Damping Sphere, of course. And that's going to be better than having any one of these individual cards, especially since we can't transmute to the ROS anyways. So that's good, that's good. And here we just go ahead and slam Karn. There's no reason not to as our opponent. I mean, they can clock Karn for 2, I guess, but like, whatever. We uptick it, and we're going to pass it back. Our opponent's not going to be able to kill Karn here. And they draw and play Dryad Arbor, which is interesting. And they put Gristboon from their graveyard onto the Boggle, have no clue what they're holding in their hand right now. And they swing 3 at Karn, of course. Just kidding! Gotcha! Swing 3 at us, because why not, I guess. Again, none of this matters. We untap and draw Dryad, which is fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and throw that Dryad into play, play our Forest, play our Engineered Explosives on 1, and we can go ahead and use our Explosives here to blow up all the 1-drops, minus Karn, because why not? Get Engineered Explosives number 2, as our opponent can only win here if they get another Boggle into play, so... And then we pass it back. Our Dryad, of course, can use Valakut triggers to kill off this Dryad Arbor if they try to go big on their Arbor, so this game is pretty much over, as it has already been for a while, and they do continue to play out lands here, so maybe that's what they've been holding in hand, of course. They get Griftspoon back from the graveyard to put onto their Dryad Arbor to make it a 2-1 flyer to clock our Karn, and we're very afraid of that. We untap, slam the Titan, and of course it's just over at this point. They might be actually dead here. Getting Valakut Vesuva, would be 2 triggers. Pick up the Vesuva, since it would copy Bounce Land and bounce itself. Play Vesuva as a copy of Valakut, that would be 2 more triggers, which is a total of 4 triggers for 12 damage. So not quite lethal here, but we can kill the Dryad Arbor and do some damage to our opponent. So, of course, that's what we're going to do. Valakut Vesuva, copy a Bounce Land, point 1 at their Dryad Arbor, and 1 trigger up at them. And we pick up the Vesuva, play it as a copy of our Bounce Land, since we do have 1 additional land drop from our Dryad. And pick up the Boros Garrison again, play Vesuva as Valakut, send all of the triggers upstairs, because why not? And yeah, we can plus our Karn as there's nothing to -4, and our opponent goes ahead and scoops it up there, seeing as we have an Explosives waiting in hand, and a Dryad plus Valakut on board, and an onboard Titan. Like, that's just too much. And that is how we managed to 2-3, I believe, this league, and get some of our value back, at least. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, because, like I said, I'm recording this after the fact, so I don't remember for sure if it was a 2-3 or a 3-2 or whatever it was, but regardless, that was the final match. And for some final changes to the deck, obviously I cut the Grafdigger's Cage from the sideboard and added 1 Dismember back, as I felt like we were a little light on spot removal, and spot removal is going to be quite good against the mono-red prowess decks. It's very good against, for example, Hammer Time is very important there. Although Karn is already pretty great against Hammer Time, but regardless, there's really no need for duplicates, graveyard hate effects, so That's the thought process behind that, and that's a really small change, but it's all I could really come up with. Would be nice maybe to get a second Cavern of Souls in here. Also, having the Ghost Quarter in the board seemed fine to me, so yeah, I have nothing else to say at this point. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know what deck you would like to see next, especially if there are any Kaldheim cards that you are interested in, as Kaldheim has finally released on Magic Online, so I can play some of those cards. And I do actually have 4 copies of Doomscar, the new Foretell board wipe that I was planning on trying out in Esper, and we'll see if that pans out. I'll let you know. And yeah, this is Red Face Menace, signing off.